Welcome back to Imperial Advisor. Today we have just myself, Baz, as Justin and Owen are unable to make it. We are going to have a special one-off episode this time around. Today we're going to do a faction focus, a Killteam faction focus, looking at the Adeptus Mechanicus. As the ad mech appear in the core box, many players have some of those Skitarii miniatures floating around, but typically moved on to another faction when they got some practice in with the game. As such, many players have the impression that the AdMech are a beginner or starter faction that don't offer much in competitive play. This couldn't be further from the truth. So today I'm going to take us through some of the AdMech models, where they fit in, how best to assemble that initial box of Skitarii, which is a question many people ask, and we're going to take a look at how does a faction can adjust their kill team to beat either the elite high armor teams or the swarm teams that have recently become very popular. Let's start with those models that come in the kill team starter box, the Skitarii. You get a total of 10 models that can be built as either rangers or vanguards. The first thing we need to realize is both units have identical stats. So the differences are in their base weapons and then the rad saturation special ability that the vanguards have. The rangers have the galvanic rifle, which is a rapid fire weapon with large range, while the vanguard have the radium carbine, which is an assault 3 weapon with medium range. In the tight confines of arena, the vanguards are going to be better due to their higher rate of fire and the rad saturation ability, but the rangers can be good in more open games where the increased range becomes more valuable. Both allow up to 3 special weapons, and they have the same options. So you've got the arc rifle, which is a high strength weapon. You've got the plasma caliber, which is a high strength and high AP weapon. And you've got the transuranic arquebus, which is a high strength, high AP, and long range weapon. So when we're building the box, we have one of each in there, and we want to assemble those. I would suggest putting the plasma caliber and the arc rifle on the vanguards, as once you change the guns, the only difference really is whether they have rad saturation ability or not. So the vanguards are just going to be better. The arquebus is a long range weapon, so I built mine as a ranger, as I prefer the look. Unfortunately, the arquebus cannot be fired if it is moved, so despite its nice stats, it can be quite limited and really shouldn't be used in a specific terrain where you've got a good field of fire across the entire battlefield. So the first 3 models I'd suggest making are the Vanguard with a plasma caliber, another Vanguard with arc rifle, and a Ranger with the transuranic arquebus. As we expand the army out, we'll be interested in getting a few more of those special weapons, but initially the box is going to have those 3. Now, one thing we can see here is that there are limitations. If we wanted to do a full plasma caliber list, we could only take 3 vanguards as plasma calibers. We would then need to take another 3 rangers. The reason is they're each limited to 3 of the gunner. So and only the gunner can equip those special weapons. So while the vanguards will typically come out ahead due to the rad saturation, having a mix is good, and that's another reason why initially you'll want to put the transuranic arquebus on the ranger, because it'll free up some room for more plasma and arc weapons on your vanguards. This brings us on to the 4th and 5th models we're going to make. The Ranger Alpha and the Vanguard Alpha. We are limited to only one of each of these models, and these are the only models in the box that we can make leaders. A popular approach with leaders, which I do recommend, is to keep them away from the action and keep them as cheap as possible. They're important for that CP more than anything else. So I made my leader specialist a Ranger Alpha with just a plain galvanic rifle. That leaves me the Vanguard Alpha to go in a slightly different direction. I gave him a power sword and a phosphor blast pistol because it looks cool. This gives me some melee potential, which we don't otherwise have, and it stacks with the rad saturation ability. On reflection, I would probably change the power sword to a taser goad, as it performs better against all but the toughest units, and it'll make the Alpha great for killing swarm. Now, there are some special features, some additions that you can add on to your Skitarii models. They're the Omnispecs and the Enhanced Data Tether. The Omnispecs is cheap, and it essentially gives you a +1 bonus to one of your nasty shooting units by letting them ignore cover, so it's great to put on a comm specialist. The data tether, on the other hand, looks a little less appealing, as it's more expensive and it relates to nerve tests rather than just more killing. Now, as you will find as you play along, being able to reroll those nerve tests can be key, but more importantly, two of the big AdMech tactics, which give bonuses of +1 to hit rolls for your fight or shoot, give +2 if you've got someone with a data tether nearby. So having your data tether near one of your big units when you're about to go on a murderous rampage can really help. Only one Vanguard or one Ranger can have either of these options. So I recommend one Vanguard with the data tether, letting them get it stuck in near the action for the rad saturation, and then give the Omnispecs to a Ranger who can be a little bit further out on your supporting gun line. These two models will have their normal rifles. Alright, so that's 7 models. Now for the last 3, I would recommend building 1 Ranger and 2 Vanguard to give you some options, but favouring the Vanguards, which I perform equally well in arena or out in the open. Alright, let's look at our next option. These are the Sicarians, which can be built as either Rustalkers, which are focused on close combat solely, or Infiltrators, which also have some pretty cool pistols with ranges as good as many rifles. These are 2-wound models, making them a lot harder to kill than the Skitarii. We recommend taking 1 Rustalker Princeps and 1 Infiltrator Princeps, as they both have an extra attack over the normal models, making them even more killy, but you are limited to just 1 of each. After that, I would suggest sticking to Infiltrators, as they really are the superior model. They do have 1 less melee attack, but the pistols give them great flexibility by opening up shooting options. And if you get locked into a combat, you can still shoot with those pistols in the next combat phase if you need to be. Now, the box comes with 5 models, but only with 1 body for Princeps. So I'd suggest making the Infiltrator Princeps out of that body, and then use the Rustalker Princeps head on a normal body, maybe add a little bit of flair if you've got the extra bits. Then after that, make 3 Infiltrators. Now, the question here is whether to go with the Power Sword and Stub Carbine, or with the Taser Goad and the Flechette Pit Blaster. Really, I feel like you want a mix. The Taser Goad is probably going to work best on average across all of your different options, but you do sometimes need those Power Swords to deal with some high armor units, and having it as an option can be important. So I recommend going with the Taser Goad and the Flechette Blaster on your Infiltrator Princeps and 1 of the extra Infiltrators, and then go for your Power Sword and your Stub Carbines on the remaining 2. That will give you 2 of each model, so you can have some proper flexibility. So if you've been following along so far, you should have a total of 15 models from a box of Skitarii and a box of Infiltrators, with a total of 185 points, giving you plenty of options. I would suggest making the Vanguard with Plasma Caliber a Sniper Specialist, which will let him reroll that nasty 1 when he overcharges. As we mentioned earlier, the Ranger with Omnispecs is a great choice for a comm specialist, as he's going to be supporting one of your special weapons anyway. Lastly, I like making my Infiltrator Princeps Zealot, which gives him an extra attack and bonus strength when he charges. If the combat goes longer than a single round, then the Flechette pistol will make up for the loss in attack when compared with the combat specialism. Obviously, this is a roster and not a list, so there are some other options we could fit in. Maybe you'd prefer the Arquebus as a sniper instead. Obviously, we can't do that if the Plasma already has Sniper. But what we can do is add 2 more units to the roster. The Plasma Caliber without the Sniper Specialism, and the Arquebus with the Sniper Specialism. We'll never be able to take the Plasma Sniper and the Plasma Non-Specialist, as we physically don't have the models, at least yet, but it will increase our options. So that brings the list up to 17. We're probably going to be running 2 or 3 of the Sicarians, so we have a little bit more freedom there. But if we add 1 of the Infiltrators with Power Sword as a combat specialist, and another Rustalker Princeps as a scout, then we have a few more options to play with. Scout is a particularly interesting specialty. It's very useful in arena if you get to go first. The ability you're looking for is the level 1 tactic quick march. It's only giving you an extra 2 inches essentially, but that 2 inches in arena can be enough to put your Princeps, your Rough Princeps, in front of a door, which means he can make that opposed roll on a 5 or 6. And if he doesn't make the 5 or 6 and they do manage to open the door, they're stuck face to face with that 2 wound melee monster. So he is good for locking down corners and getting things into position. The last model we have to look at is UR025. This is a character out of the Blackstone Fortress board game. If you don't have the game, you might be able to pick up the model on eBay somewhere. This is a super tough to kill model that will soak a lot of your opponent's fire. He is expensive though, and for the cost you could have 3 Vanguard or 2 Sicarians instead. Either of those options will have greater flexibility and will put down more damage than UR025, but he will take longer for your opponent to kill. Also, your Canticles special ability does not apply to this model, so you lose the benefit of a buff every turn. UR025 is great for sticking on a part of the board and holding that, so he definitely has his uses, but it isn't necessarily a rush out and buy model. Now, I've mentioned Canticles, so it's probably a good idea to go through them. The special team ability of the AdMech is the Canticles of the Omnissiah. Each turn, your team benefits from one of 6 different bonuses. You can either roll randomly or you can pick the one you want, but if you pick, you cannot pick that option again. 3 of the abilities are beneficial in the fight phase, 2 benefit your team during the shooting phase, and 1 helps out during the morale phase. Typically in the first turn when people are closing, you'll be looking at either using Shroud Sam or Benediction of the Omnissiah, so you're going to reduce the amount of shooting you receive or increase the number of hits you put out depending on how you and your opponent are set up. In the second turn, you're probably going to be more likely to look at some of the fight phase abilities. So you'll be more interested in the Chant of the Remorseless Fist or Invocation of the Machine God, both of which help you kill enemies during the fight phase. Deciding which one to use will depend largely on the target, but typically re-rolling ones to hit is going to be better, especially with the Taser Goads. The third option, the Litany of the Electromancer, looks like a really great option against some of the Swarm lists, where you could end up rolling 5 or 6 dice and getting some kills in before anyone gets it even hit during the fight phase. As these inflict mortal wounds, they skip past toughness and saves, so it could work really well against some elite armies, especially ones like Harlequins. At the start of each turn, you should be planning out roughly how it's going to go, and based on that select your best canticle. If you're out of useful options, you can also risk a roll and hope for the best, maybe even spending 1 CP to use Gloria Mechanicus tactic to re-roll and hope you get something better. Alternatively, you can guarantee what you're looking for by using the 2 CP tactics Zealous Disciples. It can only be used once per battle, but it will let you pick a canticle that you have picked already. While we're talking about tactics, I want to mention a few more. Protectora Doctrina Imperative is a 2 CP tactic that will give a shooting character +1 to hit rolls, or +2 if they're within 6 inches of a data tether. This is why we were saying earlier that the data tether can be important. This is a good way to guarantee some hits, especially when you're using some of your bigger special weapons like the plasma calibers. For some extra fun, you can also use this during the movement phase during an Overwatch. If you have the CPs to spare, you can also use auto-tracking software, which means you hit Overwatch on 5s and 6s. So together with that and the bonus, you're effectively hitting an Overwatch with 3+, especially tasty with some of those high rate of fire pistols. Conqueror Doctrina Imperative is the equivalent during the fight phase. This one is especially notable as it helps trigger the Taser Goad ability, which requires 6+. This is a fun ability to use, but do remember that every wound after the first one that brings your target 0 is ignored, so it is possible to spend too many CPs on a single fight. Speaking of overspending, at the start of the fight phase, we can also spend 1 CP on Alpha Target Proximate to have one of the models re-roll wound rolls of 1. So it is possible to dump a lot of CPs into a single fight and do a lot of damage. Earlier, we talked about the scout move in Arena. We also have a 1 CP tactic that lets this be a little bit more reliable, called Doomstrider. It lets you roll 2 dice when advancing. As far as I'm aware, if you use this tactic with your scout, you can choose to re-roll both of those 2 dice and try again, or if you like what came up on the first 2 dice, you can spend 1 CP and add 2 inches to that total. The last tactic I want to mention is Renet Circuitry, which is one of the new ones from the Tita 7 Acquisitius box. For 1 CP, you can remove D3 flesh wounds from a target. This isn't going to heal wounds, but if your target has managed to survive an injury roll or 2, this will help them get back to fighting strength, shaking off the penalties and making them less likely to die on the next injury roll. Alright, well, we've been through the units, the Canticles, and some, but not all the tactics. The only thing left to do is to think about how we make a kill team from the roster. Well, there are 3 things to consider: mission objectives, the enemy we're facing, and the terrain of the kill zone. The most important thing is sticking to objectives and focusing on victory points. This is why swarm armies are currently popular, as they get the mission done despite heavy casualties. If this is an objective-based mission, you need to have the people to hold those objectives. Our units range between 9 and 16 points, so we're probably going to have 7 to 9 models on the table. More than an elite team, but much less than a swarm. It's not much to work with, but it's something to keep in mind. With the Sicarians, we have a lot of great fight phase potential, while the Skitarii bring some real mean shooting action. We don't necessarily have to specialize into just one, but we can consider what is going to be the most important during this battle, and maybe invest a little bit more that way. The enemy we are facing is going to be a big factor. Against a horde army, we're not going to need plasma and power swords. Instead, we want to focus on rate of fire. Luckily, the Vanguard Radium Carbines and the Infiltrator's Flechetti Blasters are perfect for this. We're also likely to get stuck in combat a lot, so we need units like the Infiltrators and the Ruststalker who are able to hold our own in melee and protect our ranged units. Against the elite armies, we need to go in the opposite direction. Plasma is king. Power swords will open those cans. Take advantage of the red saturation ability to soften up some targets. Here, we'll be looking to use our other models as screens to protect the ones that actually can do the damage. Anything that goes straight to mortal wounds is great, so the Ruststalker Princeps and the Arquebus will be looking to roll high on their wound rolls. When considering the weapons to use, look for those invul saves. Harlequins and Drukhari Witches both have 4+ invul saves, so AP is no good. Instead, we need to focus on volume of fire. If in doubt, keep shooting until eventually something gets through. The last thing we need to consider is the terrain of the kill zone. So we've talked about this a lot with the Arquebus. If it is going to be any way effective, you need to be able to shoot from essentially where you move it to on turn 1, or better, where you set it up on turn 1. If you're not able to guarantee lines of fire after that, your opponent's just going to basically ignore it. Similarly, one of the big questions is whether you're going to be playing in Arena or not. If you're in Arena, then having that Scout Sicarian ready as an option, it doesn't always work. You don't always get to go first in the movement phase, but if you can, it can get you in a great position and really lock down an entire battle. So understand your lines of fire, understand what cover there is or is not, and understand where the linchpins on the battlefield are going to be. If you can get a unit or a model with a good base, like the Sicarians, who your opponent can't get past, that can help lock down chunks of the battlefield, and that can be really important. Alright, if you've made it this far, thank you very much for listening. This has been an elaborate April Fool joke that got way out of hand, as this is a Legend of the Five Rings living card game channel. It really has nothing to do with Killteam. So if you're an L5R fan wondering what the hell happened, don't worry, we'll be back to our normal schedule soon. If you're a Killteam fan and enjoy this, well, I guess you'll have to wait till next April Fools. Anyway, thank you for indulging me, and thanks for listening.